So great. Okay, so this session is titled "What Toddlers Can Teach Us About the Challenges of Online Learning," and it will be presented by Amanda Joyce from Murray State University. And I will go ahead and hand it off to Amanda. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So yeah, I am Amanda Joyce, and I am an associate professor of psychology at Murray State University. And generally when I tell people, oh, I'm psychology, I have to clarify, oh, not that kind of psychology. I'm not a clinician. I study typically developing children. So generally 3, 4, and 5 years of age, but sometimes I get outside of that age range. And so when I started teaching about a little more than a decade ago now, I started spending a lot of time thinking about the ways in which our students are similar to toddlers in a good way. And the ways in which we ourselves are similar to toddlers. And so I thought I could share some of that thought process today, because it's helped me to try to frame what we're all experiencing during the strange times that we've had for the last couple of years. So end goal of all of this is I hope that everyone will have a second to reflect on some of the challenges to student cognition and student temperament and student emotional regulation and so on and so forth that are unique to a virtual education, and then reflect on how the things that we're learning might change your own strategies in your own position in working with students. So why toddlers? Why do I study toddlers? Because they're fun to study mostly. And one of the reasons that I think that they're super fun to study is because they're lacking in emotion regulation. So they are open books. You tell them something and they have a reaction to it. You ask them to do something, they have a reaction to it. They don't yet have a fully developed prefrontal cortex that helps them to pull back some of those strong emotions that they're experiencing. They don't yet know display rules. That those are kind of the rules that tell us, oh, okay, this is the appropriate way to react in this situation. They aren't yet familiar with pragmatics. So what is and is not appropriate to be said in different environments. So you just get everything that's on their mind. And if you're anything like me, you probably look at toddlers sometimes and go, oh, yeah, I feel you, kid. I feel you. This is exactly what's going on with me too. We're really just big toddlers. We're just a couple of decades further along in our development. And so I'm often struck by the similarities that we have to toddlers. So you see a toddler having a tantrum, and maybe you want to have a tantrum too. We're a couple of decades down the line in terms of our self-regulation, but we started there and we can remember being there sometimes. In much the same ways we can struggle with our attention like a toddler would, or with our working memory like a toddler would, and we can feel ourselves craving social connections like a toddler would. And so I want to kind of follow these parallels today and reflect on the ways in which the information that we know about toddlers' abilities in these areas can inform us in our own interactions with our students. So let's start with a problem. Problem is that people in higher ed right now are stressed out. So an article came out of the New York Times a couple of years ago, teaching in pandemics isn't sustainable. We've had a lot on our plates, right? And it's taxing us in a lot of different areas. And even outside of pandemic times, it was common for people in higher education to experience burnout. Burnout is just when you hit this wall, this exhaustion wall, emotionally, physically, mentally, and you feel like you can't move forward anymore. Your hands are tied. You just can't handle one more problem. Burnout is not something that we're going to go into depth about today, but it's something that I feel pretty passionately about right now. And so I wanted to link you to a couple of resources. My slides today are available in the Discord chat, so you can check there for a copy of them, and then you'll be able to get all of the links that are in here. One thing that's not linked here is that book that I've pictured over on the left. It's a really good one if you're struggling with burnout right now. But aside from the burnout and aside from the pandemic, those who teach online will often report that online teaching and online course design and online advising and online coordinating of things, that all of this takes more time than in person, that there's just a lot of upfront prep that has to be done. And I suspect I know the answer, but I'm going to let you guys throw into the chat. Is it easier or harder for you to do your work online? Easier or harder to teach online than it is in person? Easier now. Oh, good point. Yeah. Easier now than it was in the beginning. Some things are easier, some things are harder. Yeah. So we kind of came into this harder online, of course. We kind of came into this in a place where we just needed to figure it all out immediately at the time of the pandemic, when we thought that everything was just going to last 2 weeks and then everything would be back to normal. Depends on content materials, yes. So there are a lot of challenges that happened in that first transition, and some people have kind of found their footing, and some people are at a place where, my goodness, what I do just can't translate easier. It just takes a lot of work every single time. And so a lot of people are experiencing a lot of challenges in online teaching and online course prep. Students too have been facing a lot of stress over the last couple of years. Lots of stuff coming out recently about how university students are facing unprecedented levels of mental health crises. And the Chronicle of Higher Ed put out a fantastic article last week that talked about some of the disconnection that they're experiencing in the classroom because of that. And a fantastic quote showed up in that article that talked about the way that it interacted with our own stress. So we're as tired and burnout as our students are, but expected and do genuinely try to be accommodating and empathetic with their struggles. It's hard to find the line between being supportive of struggling students and just giving up entirely on academic rigor. So clearly we're in a difficult position, and they're in a difficult position. And they're also experiencing mixed feelings about online learning. And so it seems like every time Inside Higher Ed or Chronicle or CNN or whoever else puts out an article, it's about how all of the students want online experiences, or all of the students hate online, or because there's a lot of sampling and bias in what they're doing, but because there's a lot of mixed feelings about if online learning is working for students or not. I asked my own students about their experiences with online learning and how they feel about things, and a lot reported to me something similar to the quote on the right. I live way out in the country and our internet is so bad that I can't do classes when my sister is doing her homework. Some told me, oh, I have to drive to the elementary school to get internet. I live in an area that was recently impacted by some pretty devastating tornadoes last December that knocked out a lot of our infrastructure. That has certainly impacted our students' abilities to focus in online classes. And then we've got the problem that many of our students, even if they weren't impacted, are saying, I can't do well in these classes because I can't focus. But of course, there's the good side too. Many students report liking the flexibility of it. They like being able to try out new things. I think my favorite mixed response that I got was, my sister likes in-person stuff, but I like online. And that was said to me by a person who was taking my in-person class while her sister was taking the online class that I was teaching. So they switched themselves, but a lot of mixed feelings there. And we've got to contend with everybody's mixed needs. to try to get them to a good place. So let's science it. Stand back, I'm going to try science. And my preferred sciencing of choice is to look into those categories that we were talking about earlier, in that we are kind of toddler-esque in ourselves in self-regulation, attention, working memory, and social connections. So let's look at what the research is telling us about each of those domains in toddlers. So we'll start out with self-regulation. This is my personal favorite. This is where I do a lot of my research, and there's a lot of really cool stuff going on in this area. But even without knowing the research, I suspect that you understand that our self-regulation is pretty shot right now. And our self-regulation, when we are teenagers transitioning into college, is already kind of naturally developmentally shot. So I love these comics that I've got over on the right. Reaching adulthood, first I was like, have all the responsibility, but then I was like, have all the responsibility? This is where a lot of our students are. They're gung-ho, they're excited to try new things, and whew, adulting is hard. Adulting is overwhelming. So let's go back to the toddlers. Let's talk about self-regulation in the framework of these toddlers. So self-regulation in early childhood is often talked about in terms of our abilities to control our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors. Oh, I'm seeing a quote in the chat: with great freedom comes great responsibility. Yep. It's overwhelming, right? So self-regulation is about controlling our thoughts, emotions, and our behaviors. And there are a lot of ways to try to measure self-regulation in toddlerhood, early childhood. Up in the right, I've got a picture of a gift because it's common to measure how well children can regulate their emotions by giving them a gift that is disappointing to them and looking for their reaction to it. So you've got maybe a 5-year-old and you give them a gift of a pacifier. Social rules would dictate that we're supposed to go, oh, thank you so much for this gift. But when you're a kid, it's really hard, right? Like, oh, this sucks. I don't want this age inappropriate gift. I don't like it. Right? So we can look at their emotion regulation in that way. Another one that I really like down in the bottom left involves getting them really excited about coloring. I want to color this picture with you, but I forgot a toy in the next room. So wait for me and I'll be back really soon. While I'm gone, don't touch the paper and don't touch the crayons and no coloring. And you wait and see, can the kids avoid coloring? And most of the time, no. But probably the self-regulation task that's gotten the most excitement over the years is the marshmallow task. Walter Mischel's classic marshmallow task involved offering children a single marshmallow that they could have right now, or if they wait, they can have 2 marshmallows, which is a big deal in kid world. Right? If you just wait, you can have 2 marshmallows. And this is one I'm going to keep coming back to several times. When you grab up my notes from the Discord, you'll be able to see a video of it as well. I've linked in the bottom left. But self-regulation gets measured in really creative ways, and then we figure out the things that it's associated with to predict how we can improve it. Okay, so probably the one that gets the most attention is that self-regulation is related to better kindergarten readiness. So the preschoolers who are doing really well, not coloring, and doing really well, not acting disappointed in the gifts and waiting to get that second marshmallow, they're better ready to hit the ground running in kindergarten in terms of reading and math, but also in their social skills. So their kindergarten teachers themselves rate these children as better ready for school because they can do things like raise their hand in the classroom instead of just blurting things out. They have better peer relationships at the time and then on down the line as well. And then if you follow them way into high school and then later adulthood, you see that they have higher SAT scores and lower rates of incarceration one day. So this would imply we really want to be two marshmallow kids. And it would also imply that if we scale this up to our college students, we want them to be two marshmallow kids too. We want to help them to improve their self-regulation because of all of these academic and social benefits. And one of the good things about self-regulation is that it kind of naturally gets better with age. It's related to development in the prefrontal cortex. So the stuff up front that does the higher order cognitive processing, as we get older, it gets more developed. But the implication for our students is that those frontal lobes aren't fully developed until around the age of 25-ish. So after we're dealing with a lot of these students. Heck, when I started teaching, I was barely in the fully formed frontal lobe club. So we have to be really careful when we ask a lot of regulation from our students. And unfortunately, online learning often ask a lot of regulation from students. They need to come up with study schedules for themselves without the milestones of moving into the physical classroom, or without interacting with their peers in some cases. Even if they're having synchronous class sessions, it's up to them to focus on the task at hand instead of multitasking that. We're asking a lot of their self-regulation. Other things that it's related to, gender. Girls tend to be better in early childhood at self-regulation than do boys. It's related to your genes, mostly through your temperament. So if you have certain temperamental characteristics, if you have certain personalities, you're more likely to be more regulated. Interactions with mom, how smart you are, how well you can pay attention in different situations as measured by heart rate variability, your socioeconomic status, and more. But two things that I really want to zoom in on, because this is kind of depressing. It's all related to things that we don't have a whole lot of control over. But two things here that we do have control over are the socioeconomic data shows us that interventions can work for self-regulation. So there's a way to get in there and help people out and help improve that self-regulation for them. Second thing I want to point out is that bodily movement can help to improve self-regulation, particularly involving children in opportunities to move their body in a regulated way. So getting involved in martial arts, for example, or getting involved in dance can help allow kids the opportunity to practice moving their body in a regulated way instead of just kind of wildly thrashing about a room. And it can help to improve those self-regulation skills and executive functions overall, for that matter. So focusing on the idea that we can potentially improve these things, what can we do for our online students? Well, there is a body of research out there that suggests that self-regulation is like a muscle. This idea goes back to Roy Baumeister. He said it's like a muscle, and there's a lot of different ways that it is like a muscle. So it requires fuel. You can't go in empty and expect to do well in terms of your self-regulation. And if you have used it over and over and over again, you get a little bit weaker in the moment. So if you've been lifting weights all day, suddenly everything feels heavy in the moment. If you have been practicing self-regulation in terms of having to remember deadlines and make it to work on time and whatever else is in your day, it might be a little harder to pay attention during Zoom class that night, or to take the time to really study after you get everybody in bed for the evening. Okay, but it gets stronger with practice. When I taught in K-12, we'd do daily yoga and a series of stretches. Perfect. I love that. It's so helpful. So helpful. Can get those wiggles out and can help to allow opportunities to quiet the mind and practice this regulation. So this practice is something that we can help give our students as well. Once we can wrap our mind around the idea of, okay, we aren't just teaching a subject area, we're teaching skills to these students, we can start to allow them the opportunity to practice the skills that they need to succeed in the classroom. Okay, just like a kid, you start small and you work your way up, and you start with fun opportunities instead of stressful things. So when you have young kids around, you can give them opportunities to practice easy chores. Okay, my daughter is 4. Her biggest chore is she feeds the cats. She likes interacting with the cats. The cats swarm around her. It's a fun thing she can do, but she has to remember to do it. She has to regulate herself, and she can't get distracted on the trip in between the kitchen where the food is and where the food bowl is, and so on and so forth. Right? We can do this for our students as well. I got a tip several semesters ago that said, we want our students to have a study schedule. Why don't we ask them to give us a study schedule? And so you can offer extra credit to students for putting study times in their planner. Put it in a physical planner or on a Google Calendar and take a screenshot of it. But have them schedule out that time and see, oh, okay, it is a little bit challenging to try to fit in these study sessions in between this sorority event that I need to get to, and this athletic competition I need to go to, and this job, and so on and so forth. Have them practice putting it in there, making it work. They can use the pretty colors and whatever makes them feel better. But it's giving them that practice at the beginning of the semester to learn a little bit of regulation of, yep, these are the times that I need to study. Okay, just like we would scaffold their learning, we can scaffold the self-regulation as well. So giving them those small opportunities and then working our way up to the bigger and bigger and bigger opportunities. So let's practice spending 15 minutes on this task at hand. And then later in the semester, maybe you have, if you're a lab class, maybe you have an entire lab section of, okay, we are working through this together and I need you to focus the whole time. But giving them incremental growth opportunities throughout the semester would be very much in line with what the research is telling us to do with kids. And of course, we can model for them just like we would model for kids as well. So modeling is this idea that we practice in front of somebody else, we demonstrate something, and kids can pick it up. So dad can teach a kid how to shave just by having the kid there and watching. Or likely the first time you drove, you kind of already knew what to do because you spent all those years in the back seat leading up to it, watching your parents or your caregivers drive. Right? We can model self-regulation too. It's okay to take a deep breath in class and say, okay, we ran into another tech glitch. This is how we're going to handle it. Or to we use Canvas in my university, send a Canvas announcement that says, whew, we ran into this and I just needed a breather before we could do this. And allow them the opportunity to practice regulation in the ways that you do if they're running out of strategies. So that's regulation. Let's switch gears to attention, because attention is, I'm trying really hard not to say, attention is getting a lot of attention recently. Attention is a hot topic recently because many of us are reporting feeling like we're losing our attention spans during the pandemic. We're having to flit between a lot of things. Our students are having to flit between a lot of things. So being in online classes while they're also trying to answer some emails and talk to their friends over Messenger and so on and so forth, right? So it can be kind of a difficult time for our attention span. We haven't really had a whole lot of opportunities. Oh, I see, I have that article queued up right now. Yeah, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it hard right now. Attention span is not what it used to be for me, and certainly students are showing signs of struggling as well. I would encourage everybody, you do not have to put this in the chat, but to reflect, did you do something off task during today's conference sessions? I did. I was really nervous about this presentation. I had it up, kind of looking through it every once in a while whenever there was a lull in a conversation. Oops. But if it's tempting to us, you know it's tempting to our students. And certainly we've all run into weak moments where we're trying to prep our classes or we're trying to grade and poof, it's rough, right? And we get distracted and we lose that attention. Attention is something that is well researched, going way back into basically newborn babies, because in babies, at least, you can follow their blinking. If you haven't spent a lot of time around young children recently, you might not know that they focus so hard on things that they just don't blink. they can bring their blinking rates. Oh, thank you. Don't worry. This is a good session. But they'll focus so hard that they just won't blink at all. So you can track when they're losing their attention by when they start blinking more frequently, right? In older kids, you can follow eye tracking. So you show them different stimuli and they move their eye across a screen, and where they're putting their attention is where that eye tracking is showing up. So you can see what's grabbing their attention a little bit more. So it can give us a little bit more information about their attention focusing abilities and their attention shifting abilities. And attention shifting is often thought of as kind of a bad thing, like, oh gosh, why can't you just focus? We want you to focus. But attention shifting is really good because sometimes we need to move our focus, say from a television screen as a child to mom in the next room saying, hey, can you come here for a second? Okay, so we want attention focusing and attention shifting to both be strong. And executive attention is what pops up around middle childhood to help us balance when we're supposed to be focusing and when we're supposed to be shifting. So it tells us what to do with our attention. And we know that it's growing fast in middle childhood. So the toddlers are really struggling with it. And it hasn't really been around long enough for the adolescents and early adults that we often see to have good practice and good knowledge of how their executive attention works. My lab did a study several years ago that showed that you could predict executive attention in 4-year-olds from some concurrent measures of what their parents were saying about their attention and what was going on in that prefrontal cortex. But you could also predict what would happen to them when they were 8. So we already knew at 4 years of age how well these kids would do at 8 years of age on particular tests of attention. Well, crud. That seems like it's a little bit already set in stone. But what we can do in helping ourselves as adults and helping our students is providing them opportunities to see when attention is at its best, when they are struggling with attention focusing and attention shifting, bringing it to the forefront so that they can get a little bit of understanding of where they might be in all of this. I'm not going to make you do this because I know we're running a little bit short on time, but an exercise that I like to do with my students is have them pull out a piece of paper and write 2 lines worth of stuff. On line 1 is the opportunity to write the alphabet letter by letter by letter. Line 2, write numbers 1 through 26. And then they have an opportunity to do that again, but alternate. So write A and then write 1 and write B and write 2 and C and 3 and D and 4 and E and 5, so on and so forth, right? And so probably you can visualize just thinking through it yourself. It's a lot harder when you're alternating. We're not good at shifting our attention that quickly. It's a lot more stressful for us. It's a lot slower for us. Well, my goodness, what does that mean when we're trying to study and send text messages or go to a conference and answer an email and so on and so forth, right? So providing these demonstrations can help them to see that for themselves and kind of keep themselves in check, serve as a reminder. for all of that. But I also have to remind myself in working with students, one of the golden rules in childhood is never interrupt independent play. Do not stop a kid who is playing independently, because that's when they're learning. Well, we got to remember the same thing for our students. If they are in a lab class and they are focused, don't interrupt them. Don't go up and say, hey, here's what you could be doing. But then also don't interrupt them virtually in your online classes. Stream stuff when you can, streamline stuff when you can to make it organized, let them feel a flow. Don't send them out into endless links where, oops, they can get distracted by other things on YouTube or other things on the New York Times website or whatever else. Create a routine for them and give them opportunities for good study hygiene. If you need resources in a hurry for your students, the learning scientists have put out a fantastic group of resources, PowerPoints, posters, all kinds of stuff that you can give your students to help them to learn how to study in productive manner. I'm seeing in the chat, I always check on small groups to see if they need help. How do you balance that? Not very well. I check on them too much, and I'm really having to learn to pull myself back. I got myself in trouble in my very first job in high school. I worked at a pottery studio, and I almost got myself fired because I was really tempted to always go up to the tables. You guys doing okay? Can I bring you anything? Do you need some more paint? And I had to be told several times, pull it back. They're doing okay. And I tell that anecdote to my students, and I say, I need you to come and get me when you need help. And for the most part, they learn to trust me after a few class periods, and they do. They come and get me. I've been really happy with how that has played out when I've started bringing that into my routine. Working memory is another one I like to focus on. Working memory is involved in manipulating information in your mind. It's stuff hanging out in short-term memory that you're using to solve a problem. And in children, you can measure it through something known as the dimensional change card sort task. So you have baskets. So pretend these things up on the top line are baskets, and you ask kids to play either a color or a shape game. We're playing the color game. So all the blue things go together, all the red things go together. So they put the blue boat in with the blue bunny, and the red bunny in with the red boat, right? And then you trick them up and you say, okay, now we're going to play the shape game. In the shape game, we sort by shape. Boats go with boats and bunnies go with bunnies. And they can do that after a lot of instructions. But as you might imagine, it's a lot harder to do well on that task after you already got used to playing the color game, right? And it's even more challenging if you go back and forth. Okay, now we're going to play the color game. Now we're going to play the shape game. Now we're going to play the color game again. This one, we're going to play the color game too. Now that one, we're going to do the shape game. When you rapidly switch back and forth, kids' performance gets awful. Even though you're telling them the rule every time, they just want to pick a way to sort and stick with it. And so people have tried to figure out, how do we fix that? Well, from it, we've learned that working memory is related to your age and related to that prefrontal cortex development, which we can't really do much with, but we can manipulate accuracy on the task and reaction time on the task by giving stickers. So stickers, the currency of childhood, can get you to slow down and really focus on the task at hand. Well, what is the adult equivalent of stickers? There's some research that looks into things like virtual badges, and I'm a fan, but have found them not to be very motivating in at least my group of students. The research says that they can be motivating overall. But I use what I consider to be the adult equivalent of stickers, extra credit. So extra credit has a little bit of research into it that shows that it can work. It can get you the results that you're looking for. People who are offered extra credit for studying study more. They have more study sessions, and they're starting their assignments earlier and otherwise showing some more regulated behavior. So we can use extra credit to kind of get things done. It doesn't have to be a high percentage of the grade. I loved, there was a study that came out last year, and probably similar ones before that, that said that students think in points, not percentages. So if you make your class out of, let's say, 1,000 points instead of 100 points, then you can offer extra credit that's 10 times more points, even though it's still the same percentage of the grade. And students go, oh, this is a 3 extra credit point assignment. And they can get really excited about that. And then the last little area that I want to just briefly talk about is the need for social connections. So online education, it can be difficult in establishing social connections because we don't have those same opportunities to run into each other in the hallways and otherwise informally interact in a classroom. It has to be created a little bit more. And of course, social interaction is important. So if you go into Maslow's ideas, you've got a whole piece of his hierarchy of needs belonging to love and belongingness. Interacting with other people is important to who we are as human beings, and it's important to who we are as educators and students as well. So there was a study done not too long ago in a community college that asked students, what's the most important predictor of why you're here? What makes it so that you want to be at this university? Top 2 responses were my relationship with my professors and my relationship with fellow students. So they want this social connection. Social connection is really good at being reinforcing in terms of operant conditioning. But when we don't get it, it can feel pretty punishing, right? You post on a discussion board and nobody likes your post, or nobody responds to your post, and it feels gross, right? On the good side of things, we know that reinforcement works with toddlers, particularly social reinforcement. So sticker charts are good, but mom saying, great job, can work even better, right? That social reinforcement is really important to us. But how we praise matters. There was a study done on elementary school children several years ago that gave kids math problems to work on. And at the end of it, they either got no feedback on how they did on those math problems, or they were told, you are so smart, or they were told, oh my goodness, you worked so hard on these problems. But every group was asked, you want to take some extra problems home with you to work on? And those who were praised for their intelligence were less likely than any other group to say that they wanted to take problems home. No, I don't want to, because if I take problems home, then you might find out I'm stupid, right? But the group who was praised on their effort was more likely than any other group to want to take problems home. I work hard. I showed you I worked hard, and I can show you again tonight that I work hard, right? So I'm always very careful with my online students in particular to say, wow, you rocked this assignment. I am so glad for you that you got to see your hard work pay off. And it's an effortful kind of second step in many cases, but it's important to make sure that we're offering that social praise in the context of this positive praise of hard work. Okay. As you might imagine, this can go wrong in many ways. Students who are in an online environment that doesn't allow for interaction can feel left out and not confident in their abilities and not getting that reinforcement that they need. And so it's possible for students in online classes to kind of reach a place of learned helplessness. I'm cheating a little bit. The research here is in dogs, not in toddlers. But basically, there was a very sad study done in dogs that showed that if you made it so that they couldn't escape a shock on the floor, they eventually stopped trying to escape it. Well, online students, if they feel like no matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, I can't get the interaction that I want. I'm not doing as well on the assignments as I want. It can lead to some of this learned helplessness. The good news is we can reverse it. So the way that Seligman reversed this in dogs was he physically picked up the dogs and showed them how they could escape a shock. We can kind of do that with our students. I mean, we can't physically carry our students, at least I can't, but we can carry them in that we can show them you can be successful on this particular assignment. You can learn this material until they realize, oh yeah, I can, and they do it on their own. I'll fast forward a little bit. Some ideas for social interaction. I'm sure you've seen many, many good ideas today. But one of them I'd like to zoom in on is this idea of, instead of offering office hours, offer happy hours to students. So come in, Zoom, have a more casual interaction with those online students so that they don't have to feel so overwhelmed. Office hours can be really scary terminology. They feel like it's just an opportunity to ask questions and they're on the spot and so on and so forth. But happy hours comes with a more positive connotation where you can just socialize with the students. Rest and self-care, of course, is important as well. When we see a toddler melting down, one of the things that we look for first is, are you hungry? Are you tired? Honest to goodness, last night we were up late at night. There were tornadoes in the area. So I was up with my daughter in the closet, hiding from these tornadoes. And she was acting out a little bit. And she said to me, she's 4 years old. She said to me, I'm having bad actions because I'm tired. I have bad actions when I'm tired. Oh my goodness, my mom heart exploded. I was so proud of her, right? But do we not do the same? We get tired and we have bad actions. And our students can get tired and have bad actions. So encouraging them towards the self-care that they need during these trying times can really help them to focus on other things like self-regulation, improving their attention, and all of that. So that's that. I have my contact information up here. Again, the slides are available on the Discord, and I would love to chat with you about your thoughts on all of this. What's worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? In what ways are you feeling like a toddler today? If you're like me, you're feeling like it's the end of the day. I would like that nap now. So I'll stick around for a second, but thank you for coming to the session. Thank you for being here. I hope you'll reach out if you have any thoughts or questions. I'm seeing in the chat, it's 6 p.m. I've been working since 8 and I'm pooped. Yeah, I feel you. So thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Amanda, I was wondering if you could indulge me with a question. I was curious about like similarities between strong relationships between like caretakers and toddlers versus their peers, and how that nurtures different aspects. And if there is a parallel between peer relationships at the online level versus relationships to teachers or instructors, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I have all these thoughts buzzing through my head, so I'm going to try to organize them a little bit. From the developmental psychology framework, you've got attachment theory, and Mary Ainsworth talks about this relationship that you have with your primary caregiver is setting you up for positive relationships with everybody else in your life, because you're creating an internal working model of this is what a relationship should be. So I trust my mother, so I trust everybody else, right? when we start moving into peer relationships, it's normal in middle childhood to start a transition towards hanging out with your peers a little bit more. But then we start transitioning more and more and more in adolescence and early adulthood. And it would seem that that transition is getting a little bit disrupted from everything that's going on in our virtual world right now. So we're not getting the same face-to-face interactions in person that we're used to having. And it's making it so that people are feeling more distant from one another. So you're spreading your attention across hundreds, thousands of relationships instead of one at a time. And I was struck just today in my in-person research methods class. I had them do a data collection for a big semester-long project that they present on later in the semester. But today I had them talking about, okay, what would you have done differently? And they talked about, well, I really would have liked to collect my data online instead of in person. I said, okay, let's talk about that. Why would you have wanted to do it online? And they said, well, doing in-person data collection just feels weird because we're asking these freshmen to come into a building go into a classroom and talk to somebody they've never met before they fill out this questionnaire. And I was just struck because we've always done in-person data collection, but they were recognizing that the freshmen just are not feeling that right now because they haven't had the opportunity in the last couple of years to meet new people in these situations. It's much easier for them to go online and not have that interaction. And so we're kind of backing off of some of those skills.
Thank you.
Yeah. What else is out there?
I'm still formulating ideas. I wish I had something intelligent to bring to the table.
I understand you. It's been a long day. There's been a lot of information to take in all day long.
I will say I thought your information on extra credit was just fascinating and kind of like the adult sticker. I'm going to, if it's all right, take that for some of my professional development moving forward.
Oh, that's fun. But yeah, and I went quickly, so I don't know if you saw it, but I did see in one of my teaching groups a couple of weeks ago, somebody talked about for April Fool's Day, they went into their classroom and they said, oh, I've got this thing, my dean is on the back. He says we need to get these grades down. They're too inflated. We need to get people's grades down in this class. So if anybody is willing to take a B or a C in the class instead of the A that you have, I'll give you some extra credit. Any volunteers? And people raise their hand because we're so conditioned to just want to grab onto that extra. What do I have to do? I'll do it. But wait, I'll take a C for extra credit.
I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Maybe that actually brings up a question. There we go. I found some kind of in line with the idea of extra credit. Do you find any benefit in kind of this idea of gamification of an online course? I guess that would be kind of in line with that extra credit idea. But I know some instructors I work with are really hesitant to try, oh, this is supposed to be a serious course on like introductory physics. How or why should I gamify something that we should take seriously? I'm just kind of wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, really good point. So I personally haven't tried gamification because I have a hard time wrapping my mind around it. I'm not a gamer myself. So like the ways in which it would translate aren't really working for me in my head right now. But what I've read shows that it can be really useful because when you play a game, you get to the end, you fail, and you just start over again, right? Like you're motivated to like, no, Mario is not going to die in level 1 or whatever else. So making your classes where you want to go back and try again seems like a really positive thing. I just haven't figured out how to pull it off yet.
Yeah, and I haven't either, but I kind of like that idea that failure as learning or the pedagogy of failure and how that could potentially be that engagement process for a student. That's intriguing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing it up.
Oh, thank you.
Well, we're right at 4:50, so I'll stop recording, and if anyone wants to add stuff